Welcome back to Non-Partisan Hacks, the podcast where we talk about good government from the local level on up. I'm Joel Grenz, a city councillor in Parksville, British Columbia.
And I'm Sean Wood, also a Parksville councillor. We're here to unpack what's working and what's not in the world of local politics, with little help from some good people along the way.
Yeah, and speaking of which, we've got a great show lined up today because our guest is someone who's spent a lot of time behind the mic talking with mayors, councillors, MPs, MLAs, I think maybe even prime ministers from across Canada. Chris Brown is the host of Cross-Border Interviews, and he's joining us to share what he's learned from hundreds of conversations with public officials from every corner of the country.
That's right, and if you're interested in local government, how it works, what makes it better, and what other communities are trying, you're going to love this one.
That's a good line. Quick plug, you can check out our website at nonpartisanhacks.com. That's where you'll find all our past episodes, show notes, and ways to get in touch.
And as always, just a friendly reminder, the opinions shared on this show are our own. They don't represent our councils or any official body. We're just a couple of folks trying to make sense of the system and maybe even improve it.
Yeah, there's our disclaimer. So before we bring on Chris, Sean, anything going on that we should bad about before we Chris is on, so let's just bring Chris on.
Sure. Welcome, Christopher Brown.
Thanks so much, Joel and Sean, or I should say counselors, for having me. I'm just going to sort of preempt this and say your last guest got some beautifully homemade bread, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
I just
you
want
heard
to make
about
sure
that.
I get some bread as well, because your second guest needs to also bring some bread. So please, if you have some, love to have some homemade bread there, Sean.
When you visit Christopher Brown, I guarantee we'll get you some bread. It's an in-person gift. It's really hard to send it to you over the call here.
That's true.
We'll send you a bread emoticon or something, an emoji. You definitely should have you out this way. I'm sure. Have you been out to Parksville, beautiful Parksville, British Columbia?
I have not. I spoke with Sean earlier in December for the cross-border interviews, and I told him this summer I would be coming by and making a stop in Parksville, and I put it on the agenda, and I've actually got the date, and I'm coming out to see Parksville later on this summer. So anticipate Chris Brown and the Cross-Border Network being in Parksville and on Vancouver Island for the month of September.
Oh, September. Okay. So are you going to be here for UBCM then?
That's why I'm coming.
Right on.
All right. Okay. Bread is definitely in your future. I'm just speaking for Sean. I don't make bread.
No, that's fair enough. Okay, so Joel, did we want to start with the article here?
No, we're going to get started on just high level. So Cross-Border Network. Can you give us the Coles notes on what it is, why you did it, how it started? What is this all about?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the show because, as you said in the introduction, I'm usually the one who's asking the question. So to talk about myself is kind of fun. But the Coles Notes version.
That's why we started a podcast. Oh, sorry.
There you go. There you go. That's exactly why people start podcasts, because they want to talk to people. And that's really what my show came down to is I was traveling back and forth from Calgary to Slave Lake, where I was working at the time for a municipality. So that 600 kilometers round trip one way, back and forth every weekend, because I lived in Calgary. I worked up north in northern Alberta, and I was back and forth, and I was listening to different podcasts. And I thought to myself, I can do this. I have people that I know that I could talk to. And I decided in 2019 that I was going to launch a show. And my premise was, I want to have conversations. I got sick and tired of social media, because social media, you had to, at that time, sort of talk in 180 characters. You had to talk by photos. We lost the art of actually having a conversation with people. So I started talking to people who just had backgrounds that I didn't know about. I talked to an archivist. I talked to someone who was a pro-gun lobbyist. I talked to car manufacturers. I just wanted to have conversations. Where the show came from, where it sort of molded into where it is today, only focusing on municipalities, was I had the pleasure of knowing at the time Taneem Rudik, who was the past president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the organization that sort of does advocacy work on the federal level for municipalities in Ottawa. I knew her because she was a councillor in Vegreville, Alberta. I asked her if she wanted to come on the show. She sort of said, "Who are you? Why are you talking to me?" I'm paraphrasing that. That
was going to be my next question, actually.
And she said, sure. I did a bit of research, and I talked to about 5 different municipal leaders in Alberta at the time. And I saw our numbers sort of go up, but I thought, what's this all about? Why are people tuning in to listen to municipal leaders? Like, that just doesn't seem reasonable to me. A few years later, in 2021, I had the opportunity to cover the Calgary municipal elections here in Alberta because I had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. I couldn't do my driving back and forth. I was laid off from my job because of my cancer treatments, going back and forth. And I kind of got to a point where I said, I'm going to do this full time. I have to wait for radiation. I have to wait for chemotherapy. I'm just going to enjoy myself and talk to as many people. Traditionally, in municipal campaigns, you have the mayor's race and then you have the councilor's race. Most people don't tune into the councilor races. So I said, I'm going to talk to as many people.
Sean's looking very insulted right now.
It's true, though.
I know it's true. I'm just teasing.
No, so we saw the numbers rise again. We were 5 times a week during that campaign. And then in 2022, I decided I was going to do a full month of shows dedicated to municipal leaders from across Canada. See if lightning could strike twice. Didn't think it was going to happen. And lo and behold, October 2022, I released 25 episodes with municipal leaders from across Canada, whether it be the mayor of Halifax, now Lieutenant Governor Mike Savage, Danny Breen from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, just different people who Tanine Rudick had introduced me to. And people started tuning in. And I thought, okay, something's going on here. I was still going through treatments, and I'm one of those people that says, I'm going to try something for a year, and if it doesn't work, it's only a year out of my life. In 2023, I decided I'm going to fully only talk to municipal leaders from coast to coast to coast. From the smallest municipalities to the rural settings to districts to regional districts, I was going to try and talk to as many as I could and see if I get a following. And we did. So now we are 3 years into this journey, and I cannot say enough good things about the people I've chatted with, the topics I've been able to dive into, and the respect that I have gained for municipal leaders like yourself, gentlemen, who have put their names on the ballot and won and drive their communities forward. So that's the Coles Note version of where we are today.
So the interesting thing is it started with the desire to have more conversations, and boy, you found some people that like to talk. It's municipal leaders. So perfect. It's like a match made in heaven.
It was. And just quick tangent on that. During the first formative months of this show, I thought I'd want to try and talk to provincial and federal leaders, but I kept on running into the same thing over and over again when I talked to those provincial and federal politicians. The talking points.
Right.
I knew exactly what they were going to say with every question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
When I talked to municipal leaders, they gave me honest, down-to-earth talking, just an actual conversation between two people. It wasn't me and a politician. It was me and John or me and Steve or me and Martha, just having a good conversation about what truly is going on in our municipalities.
It must be that awesome disclaimer you have on your show.
It is, because I don't want to, I don't come and try and fluff me. Just come to have a good conversation, because I'm sick and tired of the talking points. And I just want to get back to the days when we were able to have good conversations where we disagree on things, but we can respectfully disagree on things.
And I think the voters want that too.
I would agree on that statement.
Yep.
Well, and that's what we're about here at this podcast as well. The idea behind starting this is nonpartisan. We want to cut through all the talking points and through the party positioning on things and try to get at what real people would want to do for policy and how they're juggling with all the challenges that we've got in our communities across the country, but starting with our core here in Parksville. So you're the right person to talk to, and I think the right person to get some additional insight on as far as maybe what some of the what you're seeing the commonalities are across the country as you talk to these guests. What are you hearing? Like what is the thread that goes through all those conversations?
There's a few things there's a few macro issues that are currently thread throughout the entire municipal family, whether you're in Haines Junction, Yukon, whether you're in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, whether you're in Parksville, British Columbia, or Amherstburg, Ontario. Municipal funding, housing, are the top two issues that I hear over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Now, those are the macro issues, and there's a lot of things that can be broken down into those two areas, whether it be housing, mental health and addiction, support systems, affordable housing, infrastructure.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that go into this, but if I had to sort of narrow it down to two, those would be the two macro issues that are currently sort of challenges to every single municipality except one. And I say that because I had the pleasure of chatting with the mayor of, I'm going to get the name of the community wrong here, Mayo, Yukon, where he said housing is not an issue for his community because he has enough housing, but no one wants to live in his community because it's so rural and remote that the housing is just sitting vacant right now in the Yukon because an industry closed up, moved away, and people left and just didn't sell their houses. They just moved on.
Interesting. Yeah. I was just watching some of your conversation with Leah Main she's in a small community of under 200 people in British Columbia. And she was talking about the need to have complete communities in order so that you don't just have like work camps in some of these rural areas. And I was like, well, that's actually a very interesting perspective and maybe apropos to what is seen as regards housing in some of those more remote and rural areas that may be lacking kind of the full community sense and therefore don't have other reasons for people to live there other than if there is some kind of industry.
I agree with that. The issue is, and I think this is the subtle shot at the provincial and federal governments. And I heard it over and over again while I was at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities earlier this year in Ottawa. We often get into this idea that there's a triangle within Canada. It's Vancouver, it's Montreal, it's Toronto. Those are the three major epicenters. And we often forget about the rural remote communities. You talk about Councillor Main from Silverton, British Columbia. Her community is as important to them as Vancouver is because they are living in their communities. They are trying to make the best of their community. But when you have provincial and federal governments making decisions that are traditionally for more urban centers because they are where the population lies, it makes more rural and remote communities feel like they're not being heard. And that's the other thing that I'm hearing when I talk to municipal leaders from any parts of Canada right now is the provincial, territorial, and federal governments need to start listening. And we heard it a lot at FCM. We need to be invited to the table and actually have a seat at the table, not just a metaphorical seat. We need a seat at the table. There needs to be a seat at the table, whether you're a large urban center or a small rural community or a small urban a village. You need a seat at the table. And until then, the other two macro issues are never going to be fixed, I believe.
Chris, what do you think after all your interviews that you've done? Obviously, some amazing work. What do you think that looks like to get, say, rural communities at the table on a provincial or federal level? What does that look like?
Start talking to them like adults in the room. Okay. We often hear from, the worst thing I've ever heard a provincial politician who was a minister responsible for municipalities say to municipal leaders is, you are a creature of the province. That is the worst thing that I've heard from it because that's basically saying you are not important. We know what's best for you. While the parents traditionally know what's best for their children, the children can sometimes make smart decisions on their own. And the children, in this case, if I was a provincial politician, are screaming that we want to be treated like adults now because we've been around longer than provinces, but you're treating us like we are we are the underlings of you. And that's the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
So that's where I think a lot of issues are coming down to. Politicians, whether it be Ottawa, whether it be Victoria, Edmonton, Regina, Winnipeg, are traditionally treating our municipalities like they are less than a level of government. Scott Pearce, the former president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, said it best. Municipalities are the closest to the people. They're the government of proximity. You notice when things happen in your municipalities.
Yep.
You don't notice traditionally that quickly when things happen provincially or even federally. But if your water stops, you know when the water stops.
Yep.
When your passport doesn't come in 3 weeks, you go, oh, my passport hasn't come in 3 weeks. Guess I have to call somebody. So municipalities need to be treated like equals. And I'm optimistic that we are in a new era where that could happen. But my pessimism is saying, don't be too optimistic because you've been burnt before.
Well, I think a key thing on that, and you talk about the child of the province concept and metaphor, is that I think it's important that you go through that childhood if you want to be a federal or provincial elected official, is that you do take that stage of development seriously and go run for local government before you move on to federal or provincial government, because I've seen the increased perspective you get from having that on the ground understanding, and the people that I've seen who've gone on to federal or provincial elected office who have that background, they just have so much of a better perspective and view on their own community, and also how to get things done at the local government level that makes them a much better partner for the local government when they are actually in that other office.
Can I throw a little but if?
But if, yeah. Yep. We're all about controversy.
But I would agree with you, Joel, on that municipal politicians usually make better provincial or federal politicians. But if they don't follow through on what they know from when they were elected as a municipal politician, then it doesn't mean squat. If a municipal politician goes to the provincial level and says, I'm going to bring the municipal voice, and then falls in line with the party, then I think you have issues that are going on. And I think this is where your nonpartisan show is going to be wonderful, because we have to remember that. We have to remember that municipalities are being downloaded upon from the federal, from the provincial government. And we have municipal leaders who are in the provincial government, whether it be in British Columbia like yourself, here in Alberta, all across Canada. But when they get elected, they seem to forget that they were ever part of a municipal government until they're speaking in front of municipal leaders. So I agree. They make great politicians provincially and federally, but they have to remember where they came from.
Yeah, community above party really is
amen to that.
The goal, right?
Ideally, in an ideal world.
Speaking of the whole downloading, offloading, responsibility sharing, you wrote an article recently that speaks a bit to that topic, and when we want to chat about that a little bit, and maybe I guess we should get people up to speed if they didn't read the article, what the kind of thesis of that is. Who wants to take a kick at that, Sean?
Well, I'll just start it off, Christopher. And you knew you were kind of in some treacherous waters right away, because you open it up with might lose some friends over this one, but have been working on this for a bit. And then your quote from your own article is, blaming the feds or provinces only gets us so far. If you're still passing 0% tax increases in 2025, ask yourself, what services did you cut? What roads didn't get fixed? What maintenance got deferred? And how much more will it cost 5 years from now? And so, I guess your premise is that there are local governments who aren't raising the money they need for their own services with, say, 0% property tax increases. And so I think you want to see those local governments doing their part in making sure they're doing their part before they start screaming about provincial or federal responsibilities. And before you get into it, I did reply to you on LinkedIn and Facebook that Parksville has passed, some non-zero property tax increases, and we feel like we're doing our fair share, between 5 and kind of 7%, including putting 0.5% away every year for asset and infrastructure, kind of contingency fund. So anyways, I'll pass it over to you, Chris, and you can kind of walk us through what got you to the article.
So this article has, like I said, in the sort of preamble, and you just read it, it's been coming for some time, because we are in the midst of an election season here in the province of Alberta, where municipalities will be heading to the polls in about 4 months, in October.
Okay.
And the one thing I'm hearing over and over again is candidates who are putting their names forward, or who are raising their hands, are saying, we need 0% tax increases for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Oh.
We have politicians in the last budget cycle who have come out and said, we're fiscally prudent with your money. We've all passed 0% tax increases. understandable. That is a reason to be happy. It is the political, it is politically savvy of them to say, we have kept your taxes low at 0% for year 4.
It's an easy sell.
It is. But here's the thing. Year 5 is going to be tricky. When I put that post out, when I wrote the article, I didn't expect it to blow up as much as it did. And I've had very strongly worded emails from across Canada, let's put it that way. So you're not alone there, counselor. But holding tax increases at 0% year after year is political is popular.
For sure.
But it's economically reckless.
I think so too.
Local governments face inflation. I face inflation in my day-to-day life. I understand that every year things are going to go up. The cost of doing business goes up. The cost of getting groceries is going to go up. What does that mean? That means I have to make more money. And if I'm not bringing in more money, then at the end of the year, my RSP is going to say, Chris, what's going wrong? What's going on? Why aren't you putting more money into me? Municipalities need to do the exact same thing. Municipalities who pass balanced budgets are doing a disservice for the municipality of 10 years from now. We are currently in a place right now where we are seeing the sins of our past come back and haunt us. 10, 15 years ago, there was municipality after municipality who refused to raise taxes. Who just kept it at 0% because that was the political thing to do, and they would find other savings other places. Now look at us. Last year at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities here in Calgary, we had a major water main break. Understandably, water mains break. That's what they do when they're 70 years old. But guess what? They're going to be 71 next year. They're going to be 72 the year after that. If you're constantly keeping it at 0% across the board, then you are not going to be able to pay for any potential challenges that are going next year. This is the part where I think I got into a lot more trouble. Provinces and federal governments are downloading left, right, and center onto municipalities, which is completely understandable. That's what they do. They pass the buck to the municipalities because you literally have nowhere else to blame but you. But there are some municipalities out there in Canada right now who are taking on responsibilities that the provinces have not downloaded upon. They are passing 0% tax increases this year. And that is where I have an issue. If you are taking on more provincial and federal responsibilities, then you need to understand that you cannot go to the province and say, hey, we need more money because we're trying to fix an issue that is in your jurisdiction when it's not legislatively mandated by the province or the federal government to fix. Healthcare is a prime example. More and more municipal leaders are taking upon themselves to recruit doctors because that's what they feel is important. But if they continue to do that, then the province is going to say, well, why do we have to recruit doctors if the municipalities are going to just do it themselves? So I don't have to, we can decrease our health spending this year because the municipalities are going to pick it up willingly. And that is the part where I'm getting frustrated at.
Really?
Same politicians.
That's so interesting. So the second part of your article, which is where you're basically saying, stop taking on the responsibility willingly of provincial or federal governments, leave them to do that. Don't be doing things like, whether it's, I guess you gave the doctor's example, like staying out of healthcare. That's clearly not local government responsibility. Your water main is broken, but you're working on getting new doctors into the area. Obviously, you're neglecting your responsibility in favor of taking on the provincial government responsibility. So you're getting pushback on that part of it, eh?
Yes, because they will say to me, well, if not us, then who? Who's going to fix it? Well, hypothetically, it would be the provinces that fix these issues. But the provinces see that the municipalities are willing to pick it up themselves. So you can't ask more money from the provinces when you are responsible for the downloading of the responsibility onto yourself. When we see accountability by saying if the municipalities are going to wholeheartedly say it's no longer in our jurisdiction to do this, the province has to do it. It's going to be political suicide. I understand that because if you, after years of saying you're going to do something and then all of a sudden you say, no, it's not our responsibility anymore, some people are going to be upset. But we have to. We have to go back to this idea. And I think the federal government and Premier Smith of Alberta said it the best over the last few months. The federal government needs to stay in its lane. Well, I would admit the federal government needs to stay in its lane, the provincial government needs to stay in its lane, and the municipality should stay in its lane. All three levels should stay in its lane. If we're all going to be driving together in this great country that's called Canada, we should all be driving in separate lanes and not trying to crash into each other. Right now, we're looking at a 3-car pileup where no one understands what level of government is supposed to be doing what.
Sometimes literally.
We know what it is.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and part of that I think has to do with education of both people that are running for office and people that are voting for people who are running for office. Because the issues that really get folks animated around an election isn't who's going to have the best asset management policy at local government, and to ensure that the cracks in the sidewalk are patched every 2 years or whatever. But they will get excited about if you signal that you take the right position on some maybe international issue or related to healthcare, which is always healthcare specifically always like the biggest issue at any election, for sure federal, for sure provincial. And then that also happens locally where you end up having to talk about that sort of stuff. I mean, I remember in the all candidates that I participated in, Sean and I were both the same one. And a lot of the questions we got were about issues that were really definitely not in our lane. And so people end up voting on your response to those sorts of issues. And I don't know how often you can go up to the all candidates and be like, well, this is what I would do if I was in the provincial government, but I'm not. I'm running for a local office. So I guess I would just try to have a good relationship with our local MLA or MP and give them advice on how I think we should be addressing an international crisis.
Well, just on that as well. So I've done over 350 now, 5 interviews with municipal leaders from across Canada.
Nice work.
And thank you. And the one thing I often hear over and over again is when I go door knocking, I never get asked the municipal question. I get asked questions about how can I get my passport quicker? What can you do to address the education system in our province? How will you vote politically in the upcoming provincial or federal election? I think the engagement, the education part doesn't just go to the candidates, but it also goes to the electorate.
Yep.
Because I think Civics 101 in grade 10, which I took in Ontario, did not do me justice about what each level of government does. Mm-hmm. They will.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows what they do.
But we say we do.
Even the teachers.
And that's the say. We say that we know how everything works, but we don't, because we are such in a muddy area right now when it comes to municipal financing that we just don't know what is actually in each level of government. So I commend FCM for calling for the municipalities to be at the table with a provincial, federal, and municipal trilateral conversation. But come to the table with realistic expectations. Don't come to the table thinking that you're going to get everything and walk away and feel happy, because you're not. Mm-hmm. People are going to be disappointed in that conversation. Yeah,
and I think maybe one other, a pushback maybe I'll give you on the article is that while local governments are by and large, raising their property taxes year after year, and the conversation around property tax time is how much of an increase is there going to be this year. We don't see the same from the budget of federal provincial governments. No one's saying, hey, how much are you raising our taxes this year? Is GST going up 5%? I'm not saying it's going up to 10%. I'm saying it going whatever 5% on top of 5% is. But it's no one's talking about that. There's not that expectation that they're raising their taxes. They're raising their revenues, presumably, somehow, maybe by selling more bonds. But they're not. The conversation is about what goodies are in the budget, not about what they're increasing our taxes for in order to deliver those goodies.
I agree, and I would challenge you on the challenge that you gave me.
Challenge on the challenge.
Challenge on the challenge. I feel like we're playing chess right now. But they do raise taxes. The federal government and the provincial governments do raise taxes, but they don't do it in the way that we all think. So in Alberta this year, municipalities were stuck between a rock and a hard place. They didn't have a lot of funding coming in, but they didn't want to raise taxes too much, property taxes too much, because at the end of the day, if they do, there's a hard chance that they probably won't get reelected. And budget 4 is usually a political budget, not an administrative budget. But when they came back and they said, "Hey, we're going to raise your taxes 1%, 2%, or whatever," the province then said, when they passed their budget, "Oh, we're raising the education part of the property taxes by 13%." I don't know the exact number, but it was a large number. And municipalities screamed bloody murder because the province downloaded that responsibility to collect that extra cost onto municipalities because they collect education. I'm assuming it's the same in British Columbia.
Yep, it is. Shows up on your property taxes.
So who gets blamed from that? It's not the provincial government. I can tell you that much for sure.
Yeah.
It's you. It's the municipality. So over the last few months, there's been talk about the province collecting that education portion of that property tax. Will it happen? No, because then they can use that as a shield and say, well, the municipalities just need to cut more red tape and find savings in their budget to make sure that you have the lowest property taxes in all of Canada. The provinces are raising taxes, but they're doing it, I don't say sneakingly, because then I'm going to get strongly worded emails like I've already gotten. They're doing it in a way that it makes it look like the municipalities are doing it and not them.
I've led people through their property tax sheets, of course, what they get in the mail, and it's surprising how few people actually look through it and understand, what is policing, what is library cost, what is a school cost, et cetera. And what actually comes from, say, your local city or your regional district is just a sliver of all of that.
Where it really took off for me was I was doing some researches on some property tax increases because I'm trying to sit down with as many municipal candidates as I possibly can for this upcoming municipal election period. And then Soyuz, British Columbia, was back in the news. 18% tax increase, not because of surprise costs, not because of downloading, but due to deferred capital planning.
Kicking the can.
They did. And that's where this idea that 0% tax increases are good politically, but they're not good for the community. Understandably, any tax increase is hard for people. I think we would all agree that there are people in this country who are struggling right now, paycheck to paycheck. $20 increase on their property taxes is a lot for some people. Understandable. But if we don't increase our service levels to help those, and by increasing those service levels, we need to increase the funding to that, how are these people going to be helped? So a 0% tax increase means that you're going to have to cut somewhere. And what's the first thing that usually gets cut in these situations? Recreation, libraries, all the things that people have come to rely on. Recreation is not a winning line item budget because it is the item in the budget that often always loses money because you never recoup the full cost of running arena, a pool. But it's important for the people who need them the most. So when we say 0% increase over 4 years, that means you're going to have to cut somewhere. That means that 6 o'clock swim class may not be happening because we just can't afford it anymore. But we should be able to. We should be able to supply funds, things for people to do. And I feel that in this upcoming municipal election, we are, especially particularly in Alberta, we're going to lose the things that people have come to rely on. And I'm afraid of what Alberta could look like municipally if that's the case.
Chris, UBCM President Trish, she replied to one of your maybe Facebook or something. She's like,
I got about 6 of the presidents across the Canada replied to me about that.
She said, Soyuz might be an outlier though, but you just referenced a couple of years ago, maybe in Alberta, there were quite a few municipalities or local governments that ran with kind of the 0% property tax increases. Have you seen quite a few, or speak to the outlier comment?
There's a few outliers. There's ones that I would say that there's one in particular. I think I'm getting my two communities. They're right side by side, so I don't want to pick on the one community and get it wrong. But there's one community that for 15 years they had a 0% tax increase.
Okay, wow.
And then one CAO. They were almost at the verge of having to amalgamate into the rural community. It was a CAO who came in and said, what we're going to do is we're going to take all our reserves in the first 5 years. We're going to spend as much as we can out of those reserves. We're not going to collect any more property taxes. We're going to spend all of the reserves that we have.
So not smart.
Exactly. And they did it in a way where it was very tricky. Looking back, I think this was in the early 90s, late 1990s, where this was going on. And then in 2000, the province, I think, had to step in and say, okay, we need to do something about this, your finances. And they're back on track now. They're in a great spot now, but 15 years with a 0% tax increase. Imagine how big that community could be if they had even a 2% tax increase each year.
Yeah, at our table, Chris, I can't speak for all of course, mayor and the rest of the councillors, but the vibe is kind of the responsible thing to do is to make sure everything is paid for. And if we have taken on some extra services, make sure we're paying for them, and then go back after we've kind of voted on all the services throughout the year and make sure to see where there might be some savings. But personally, from my standpoint, I would feel irresponsible passing a 0 or a 2% property tax increase because I know we're eating into reserves or something else down the line.
Can I challenge you on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Why do you feel it's your responsibility to take on the extra responsibilities?
No, not extra responsibilities. I'm very cautious at taking on anything that is provincial. Very cautious. That,
Okay, you're a unicorn then there, mister.
Well, it's very kind of you.
Is that what that is on your forehead? I was wondering.
I don't mean to pick on Lanceville, which is another small community here, but they have called it the voters' budget or something like that. The people's budget, I think, is one of the terms I've heard them use to describe their 0% property tax increase. And for the rest of the board at the regional district, the 0% really doesn't make sense to the other directors. We just don't understand how you run a budget like that. And I don't mean to pick on Mayor Swain or their budget. They get to do what they get to do. And I think their voters probably think it's a good idea. But honestly, from the conversations that I've had, it doesn't really seem like it's the best way forward if you want to make sure your streets are well maintained and et cetera, all the services that local governments do. But I think both Joel and I are very cautious to take on, provincial responsibility, because once you do, you're going to hang on to it forever because the province is like, great, you guys are doing it, great.
Well, it's for that reason, though, that our strategic plan has advocacy as one of our pillars, is because we recognize when we're doing our strategic planning that there are so many things that the community needs that we can't really deliver within our lane, but we can play a role in making sure that we're collaborating with the provincial and federal government to try to get those things happening in our community, whether it's doctors, whether it's any number of issues that are really things that we can't move the dial on very much. Advocacy is one way to tackle it. And the other thing that we, I think, try to strike a balance on is how much money to keep in reserves versus how much to, reserves are the opposite of what you're talking about, Chris, right? Reserves are paying today for things that are going to be an expense in the future, as opposed to people that are paying for things, taking the money from the past and living off of it now and not planting those seeds for the future residents. And so that's the balance to strike as well, which is maybe a whole separate conversation. I think it's maybe time to go to our one segment that we have on this show.
And I quote tape.
So we're going to cut to one of my most favorite podcasts. It's on the Cross Border Network, Chris, where you've probably heard of it. And we have President Trish Mandeo, UBCM president, here.
At a conference like FCM, are you hearing other municipal jurisdictions, whether it be different provinces, going through similar issues around, say, their own type of Bill 15 in their own jurisdictions, or is that unique within the BC borders?
Oh, no, it's definitely not unique, because Ontario is actually going through the same thing. And when we say undermining, we are actually being nice. The right word is power grab.
You're actually saying a power grab.
I'm saying it is a power grab. Let's call it what it is, right?
Okay, so we'll let Trish stop there. So Chris, you chatted with her a little bit on this, but Are you seeing that kind of that power grab terminology used throughout the country? If so, is it fitting or not? Please go ahead.
I think it is fitting. I think President Mandeo actually hit the nail right on the head in that statement there. More and more municipalities are being shuffled out of the conversation. Here in Alberta, we're seeing the province saying you have to go through us now if you want to work with the federal government. So if you want to apply for a grant, you have to come through us.
Oh, wow.
So the province is actually sort of grabbing the power from the municipalities to make decisions and apply for grants federally by saying we have to now be in the room when these conversations are not in the room, but we have to be we have to understand what you're doing, because we have to make sure what you're asking the federal government for is in the best interest of Alberta. So when I heard that from President Mandeo, I basically went, yep, that's exactly what everyone is hearing. I just recently got back from the Atlantic Mayors Congress out in St. John, New Brunswick, and this was a conversation that I heard over and over again from big city mayors out in Atlantic Canada. The provinces are stepping in and saying, if the municipalities want to do things now, you have to work with us. You can't do it alone anymore, because we know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And the municipalities just feel like this is the province just taking power away from municipalities. So I agree with President Mandeo fully there.
I mean, they can use paramountcy, from my understanding. They just don't do it very often. I think they're hesitant to.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and the other thing I think we see is where there's policies coming down, and we've seen this in British Columbia quite a bit, which are very clearly stepping into what is typically municipal jurisdiction, specifically land use planning. And so they're saying to every municipality that you have to have minimum number of units per lot. And so Bill 44, which sets out, essentially gets rid of single family residential zoning across the province. And then you also have associated legislation or also around housing, like short-term rental legislation. That's something that I know Sean talked to you about on your show, was the advocacy we had to do in Parksville to get a cutout, an exemption for our resort area of Parksville that ended up getting caught up in the short-term rental legislation simply because the hotels operating in our resort row technically are like short-term rentals, but really by all intents and purposes are hotels that just happen to be individually owned units. And so we really had to do a lot of work to be heard on that. And the power grab, I guess, word there can apply to these things. And we're hearing that from people in our community as well, who are frustrated that, maybe there can't be public hearings anymore under the current, like the new legislation that restricts public hearings on any rezonings that are OCP compliant. And so that's where the power grab thing is a thing. And that's where at the local government level, it's all the more important that we do our job is building relationships and bringing the pressure and the understanding, just sort of educating the provincial government on what we're dealing with. Maybe I'll give another example, is that I think a lot of people that work in the bureaucracy provincially have a pretty urban perspective on the world, and they don't understand that, say, Parksville, they may want to have certain things happen in Parksville, not realizing that our tax base is from a population of under 15,000 people, and to deliver some of the things that they expect from larger municipalities that may have the staff to deal with, even things like setting housing targets or doing a housing needs assessment. The provincial government asked every municipality to do a housing needs assessment, which meant that our staff, which is very small, had to set aside the work they're doing approving housing in order to complete a report about our housing needs.
Mm-hmm.
I also, just to throw a caveat in here, I think the provinces need to stop thinking, and it goes back to my earlier statement, stop thinking that one size fits all. Because what's good for Vancouver, which I'm assuming the Lower Mainland in BC is one of the reasons why this type of legislation is being put in around housing, is not going to work extremely well for Silverton, BC, for Kelowna, for Golden, BC, for Prince Rupert or Smithers, BC, because these communities, these smaller communities, don't have that much of a challenge when it comes to densification compared to other municipalities like Surrey or Abbotsford, where your land is getting smaller by the day. And if you don't grow up, then how are you going to grow? And you can't continue to grow out unless you're going to grow on the lakes and into the States, which I think Donald Trump would not be happy with.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was awesome. Chris, can't thank you enough for coming on our show. Hopefully it was fun to be on the other side of the microphone. And I look forward to being on your show soon. I think I'm going to be on yours next.
You certainly will be. And I thank you both for having me on the show. It's always great to chat with you gentlemen. I look forward to coming out to Parksville, sitting down and grabbing some homemade fresh baked bread.
That will be here for you, Chris. And I can't sign off without thanking you again for all the work you do for local governments across the entire country.
Yeah.
You're always showing the welcome signs for everywhere you're flying and driving, and tireless coverage, Chris. And so really want to thank you on hopefully, well, just from myself, but hopefully from all local elected people who appreciate your work.
Always a pleasure, gents.
Well, that's a wrap on episode 4 of Non-Partisan Hacks. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more about our guest at crossborderinterviews.ca and find all of our past episodes at nonpartisanhacks.com. Until next time, take care of yourself and your community.